I'm Robert Guest. I'm the foreign editor of the Economist magazine, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our conference on creating an innovative future, the key to post-crisis success, sponsored by PMI International, for whom we're hugely grateful. This conference is taking place at a momentous time in world history. The pandemic has been more disruptive to global business, to the global economy, to people's lives than almost any other thing that we can think of in our lifetimes. And the effects have been different in different countries, but there's been a great consistency around the world of forcing people to think of new ways of tackling problems they hadn't thought that they would have to experience. So we have here a panel of very distinguished speakers who are going to discuss how companies in Egypt are dealing with the unique problems that we face today at a moment of difficulty, but also of great hope. You will have seen, I'm sure, the announcement yesterday of a vaccine by Pfizer, which appears in admittedly early stage tests to be 90% effective in preventing people from getting the virus. Now, we're obviously not going to have access to that vaccine until some months in the future, but it does suggest that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so the questions are, firstly, how long it will take to get there, and secondly, how will the world be different when we get there, and how will we make it different? So I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have Ashraf Bakry, who's the MD of Unilever Mashreq. Ashraf, if you can say hello so that people can see you.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. We have Hoda Mansour, the MD of SAP for Egypt and frontier countries. Hoda, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, very good morning to everyone, and thank you for hosting us in this important session.
Great. We have Vassilis Gkatzelis from PMI Egypt. Vassilis, are you there?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you.
Great pleasure. And we have Mostafa Kandil, who's the co-founder and chief executive officer of Swvl, an innovative ride-sharing company in Egypt. So let's jump straight into it. I think there's a little bit of feedback in the background which suggests that someone has two devices on. If they could mute themselves, that would be great. Thank you. Let's jump into it by talking about the way that COVID has affected your businesses and the economy you operate in, and what you've learned from it, how you've adapted and changed. Perhaps if we could start with Ashraf Bakry. I'm sure you have a lot to tell us about disruption to supply chains and how you've overcome them. Before we come to you, I'm going to, during the course of the event, I'm going to be asking some questions to the audience. The audience are free to send their own queries through, and we're going to do some polling as well. So we're going to get it as interactive as possible. But let's have Ashraf answering that question. What have you learned from the COVID crisis?
Okay, first of all, thank you, Robert, for the question. And let me tell you one thing. In Egypt, we're now, if a year passes by without a disruption, we would be seriously worried. So for the last decade, we've been having event after event after event, starting with the Arab Spring and then the famous second revolution and then the devaluation. So you name it. So, it's for us, it's becoming what's next. Of course, COVID is something that we've never experienced before, and it has disrupted supply chains, it has disrupted consumer behaviors, consumer spend, everything we can think of. The good news is, first of all, Egypt as a country, the impact on the economy was less than others. I wouldn't say there was no impact, there was definite impact, but it was less than others. And we have seen consumer behavior shifting like everyone else. The resilience of the economy has actually been great, probably sometimes for the right reasons, sometimes for the wrong reasons. But the main two patterns that we've seen are the following. Number one, consumers 100% focusing on value for money because lots of people got impacted. We have 50% of the people going into borrowing, 70% of the people shifting behaviors, lockdown in Egypt was not as stringent as the rest of the world, so people were still going out, not as it used to be. However, it was not a full lockdown like the rest of the world. So economy kept going in a way. As a consumer, let me talk about Unilever now as an FMCG, what we've seen is the following. People shifting to smaller and larger packs, so either what we call LUPs, low unit price, because mainly of lack of cash, or bigger size, which is value for money. And for that, we've been extremely focused on making sure that we are ahead of the curve when it comes to make these products available. Usually, a product development cycle in an FMCG would take 6 to 8 months. In the case of COVID, we had products, and this is the role of innovations. We had products on the shelf in 4.5 weeks. So everybody globally responded differently to make sure that whatever the consumer needs specifically when it comes to sanitizers, soaps, etc., or everything related to COVID-19, we made sure that it's available everywhere. And we've seen lots of cooperation between every function across the company to make that happen. When it comes to consumers, spending shifted a lot. So we've seen categories like soaps, like food specifically because people were staying in home, like tea, growing at double digit at the beginning. But then we've also seen categories like deodorants, categories like hair care, etc., going down significantly. That happened for like 3 to 4 months, and then consumption started shifting again with the summer, especially that in Egypt, we've seen numbers going down significantly in the summer. Now that schools are opening, universities are opening, and the numbers are up again, we're now hoping that the announcement of yesterday actually prevents another wave, and therefore we would like to see the improvement we've seen in the last quarter continuing, but still to be proven.
Excellent. I mean, that's a lot of that's what you'd expect, but being able to bring down the lead times that fast, that's quite impressive. And I have to say, I'm not terribly surprised to hear that deodorant and hair care products weren't moving quite so fast when people were locked down. Maybe we could hear from Hoda Mansour. Presumably, you've had to ramp up quite a lot the provision of digital services to people as an awful lot of work and indeed leisure moves offline. How have you? How's your company responded to the crisis?
Thank you very much, Robert, for the question. I just want to, before starting to respond to the question, I want to comment on what Ashraf has mentioned related to the resilience of the Egyptian population. And the resilience here was quite important and significant in affecting our businesses. So there has been a plan for digital transforming Egypt, and this plan was in line with Vision 2030. When I compare the behavior and the reaction of Egypt, whether it's from the private sector or from the public sector and the government officials to the crisis and its effect on digital transformation versus the other countries in the region, I would say that the government has taken very bold moves in insisting to continue the digital transformation agenda, full speed, without disruption, amid of the COVID, stating, with announcement coming from the different ministries, headed by the ministers themselves, that they will go ahead and continue full-fledged and full speed with the digital transformation agenda. So I would say that I'm lucky to be in the technology field. Nowadays, Egypt needs to digitally transform. There are different plans to digitally transform several sectors, whether it's starting from the energy sector, the public business or services sector, or healthcare sector. There are so many initiatives in the country, and the country has responded extremely well. If I look at post-COVID, COVID will come to an end maybe next year, maybe the year after, nobody knows yet, but we are all hopeful with the vaccine that things will stabilize moving forward. If I look at the use of technology and the infrastructure, modernizing the infrastructure, both from telecommunication infrastructure and from a digital infrastructure, making sure that startups are there, they're working, they're thriving and solving problems in the Egyptian economy and problems that are facing the population at large. I'm pretty sure that we will have a very sound future. For my business, I would comment, we're not allowed to dissect or give specific numbers to the businesses per market unit, but I can tell you that we have grown double-digit growth, both on-premise and cloud, since the beginning of the year. We had one of the best performances and one of the best productivity across the globe at SAP, coming from the Egyptian market unit. So I'm very proud to be heading the team in Egypt. I'm very proud to be Egyptian, and I'm very proud to see that the agenda that has been set by the government has been successful so far.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is that growth, that double-digit growth, is that driven by increasing demand for the kinds of services you provide, or is it that you're taking business away from competitors?
It's both. I would say that we have improved our position in the market, but for sure there has been increase in demand coming from initiatives from the private sector and from the public sector. So initiatives coming to empower small and medium businesses, and most, by the way, of our revenue comes from the private sector, from small and medium businesses. But all of this is fueled with the changes, or the reforms that are happening in the market, the confidence that that everyone is seeing in Egypt, the foreign direct investments, the investments in startups, coming up with solutions and ideas to solve problems that have not been there is all dependent now on technology.
Mm-hmm. But are you getting the impression that a lot of the demand is driven by the changes in the way that people are working because of COVID-19?
I would not say that it's most of it because of COVID-19, because it was there before that. If I look at the Egyptian population, 60% of the population is below the age of 30. It's a very young country. And with the young population comes new ideas. So for instance, we have Mostafa here, is one of the co-founders for Swvl, who came up with an idea that basically impacted people's lives. So many young talents that are coming together, coming up with ideas, coming up with their own startups to solve real problems in the Egyptian community. And with those ideas, with those startups, or with those small and medium businesses, it fuels around them a big ecosystem that gives jobs, that requires more technology, that requires more innovation, and that uplifts the whole economy.
Okay, well, let's bring Mostafa in. Mostafa Kandil, can you maybe tell the audience a little bit about the experiences that your young business has had?
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much for the pandemic. Sure. So maybe I can give a bit of an intro. I think everyone before me needs no intro, but I think we still need. So maybe I just can give for context an intro about what we do at Swvl for the audience. So basically, I'm Mostafa Kandil. I'm the CEO of Swvl. Swvl, basically, what we found is that in emerging markets, public transportation is extremely broken. I'm sure many of our audience, many of the panelists have been to so many emerging markets. And consistently, we see that public transportation either doesn't exist or extremely broken, full of harassment, very underutilized, very unorganized. Governments usually spend hundreds of millions of dollars running public buses that run extremely inefficiently. So what we wanted to do in a nutshell is build a parallel mass transit system. So take whatever buses that exist in the private sector that's used by tourism industry, by the education sector, by corporates, and who suffer also from inefficiency and seasonality. We take these buses and we build a parallel mass transit system. So we started 3 years ago out of Cairo, actually. We're now in Cairo, Alexandria, Nairobi, Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, Dubai, Amman, Faisalabad. So we expanded quite nicely. We're the biggest in the bus space globally. We do hundreds of thousands of trips every day, transporting hundreds of thousands of people. We raised around $100 million of funding so far, so we're one of the most well-funded startups here in the region. And we actually just integrated with the SAP, so we're a recent client, part of this wave, actually. So yeah, basically, COVID for us has been, on the contrary to kind of what people would believe, that mass transit has been severely impacted, right? Which it has been. In the countries that we're in, most of them went into full lockdown. Egypt went on a partial lockdown. And our business came to our revenues went to 6% of what we used to do right before COVID, right? So very quickly we went down. But actually for us, it was an extremely positive event in a way. It gave us a massive opportunity to, one, rationalize our costs quite significantly, anchor our cost base at a very low end, but also gave us an opportunity, given that we're small, we're dynamic, to basically rebuild the business in a way that focus on efficiency, right? When you grow super quickly in just 3 years, you of course always prioritize growth over efficiency. So what ends up happening is you build a lot of inefficiency in place. And COVID was the only time that we can actually pursue efficiency, not growth. So it was a very positive event for us. And for us, from a consumer perspective, what the shift that we have seen is that if we break down users into, let's say, 2 major bases, right? One, which is not very price sensitive, we come in between, right? So we deliver on affordability, reliability, and convenience. So you think about it, we cater for middle class. So the chunk of it, there's a chunk that takes Uber, Careem, and on-demand transportation as an alternative, who are willing to pay for that basically when they're not using Swvl. And there's another base of our user base basically that uses public transportation as an alternative, right? So if you think about it, what happened in reality is that this high value base, this less price sensitive base, most of it was economically impacted because of the layoffs, because they wanted to rationalize their spend, right? So if they were using us, let's say 6-7 times a month, and they were using Uber, let's say 4 or 5 times a month as well, what ended up happening is they wanted an alternative that is with the same convenience, but much less cost. So as Mr. Ashraf was saying, a much better value for money, basically, right? And hence they started using Swvl more, right? So we've seen that our adoption increased and the trips per users kind of increased from that segment. And if you look at the base that was more on the price sensitive side, that were using Swvl, if we incentivize them, let's say, what ended up happening is that this base, they didn't want anymore to get in a bus where there's 200 people, right? I don't want to get in a bus that's super overcrowded, that has 200 people in it, just because of safety reasons, right? And this base was actually willing to pay more for the service in that case. So what we've done is we tried to build our pricing in a way that can price every user with what actually he can pay, not with whatever cost we're incurring, whatever we know that this user can potentially pay, what the price point that will convert him with the highest chances, we actually price each user accordingly. So just in a nutshell, ended up kind of almost now, we're pretty much at pre-COVID levels in terms of revenue, in terms of growth, but with a significantly healthier kind of business with a much more clearer value proposition, with an additional value proposition to our entire user base, basically.
And do you think that reluctance among consumers to get on buses with lots of other people, do you think that that's going to persist even once the vaccine rolls out, or are you going to have to shift to a different way of sorting, who wants what kind of service?
So actually, for us, it's all about adoption, right? The more we're able to, with the moment people kind of try the service, the more we're able to convert them, the more it becomes kind of part of our consumer lifecycle management, right? So it's our job, how do we keep these users, right? But what COVID presented is an opportunity for us to make people try Swvl for the first time, right? So to increase that adoption and to speed up that adoption in a way. So we see that people who use Swvl, now they see the experience, they're willing to pay for it, they see the price point that they're paying for with the reliability, convenience that comes along with that. Now, sustaining that base is what we see. The moment they try it, they definitely can sustain.
Okay, great. Now, before I come to Vassilis, I'm going to ask a question to the audience just to get your sense. The question is, in your opinion, how important is the use of innovative technologies to ensure success in the post-crisis era? Is that the key, or is it other things like cutting costs and so forth? So your choices are very important, fairly important, no strong opinion, not important, or not at all important. That's five levels. And if you can vote that digitally, I'll read out the results later. But let's go to Vassilis while you guys are voting. Now you faced some very different challenges during the COVID period. Can you talk us a little bit about how your firm has reacted and tried to stay innovative during this period?
Thank you, Robert. First, let me say that Egypt offers one of the world's most powerful transformational stories. I've been living in Cairo during the last 4 years, and I used to live and work in different continents, including in EU, in Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And I can tell you that the speed and scale of transformation in Egypt are nothing short of remarkable. You see it every day. And of course, COVID has created a storm to the whole world, and Egypt is not exception. But we are all proud to see that Egypt has put the right priorities, starting with the health of its people. And we have seen that the economy is quite resilient, leveraging the great reforms of the last years. And as people say, crisis creates an opportunity. And we see it's also the time to accelerate towards the vision of 2030 that Egypt has embarked socially, economically, and also impacting the environment. Now, as a company and as a major investor in Egypt, we have established our hub of operations for other countries, and we are a committed partner in the sustainable progress of Egypt. And we have put 3 clear priorities from the very beginning. The first has been the safety and well-being of our people and the communities where we operate. The second, full business continuity across the value chain. And the third is how can we accelerate our transformation towards a smoke-free future, leveraging science and technology. Starting with the first, we have been one of the first companies to establish full work-from-home policy, and we ensured 100% employment during these unprecedented times, giving peace of mind and financial security to our people. We also donated both in kind and financially to our communities and the institutions. Business continuity, we had zero disruption across a very complex supply chain, and as investors, we create employment, we are major taxpayers, we touch the lives of more than 110,000 retailers every day, and around 2,500 people in manufacturing, supply chain, distribution, directly or indirectly. And technology helped us a lot because we have seen Egypt accelerate very fast the technology adoption. I think this was already voiced by Ashraf, by Hoda, and Mostafa. And we have seen this happen, and data helped us. And we work with the government to also fight against the illicit trade, which can be another side effect of supply chain disruptions. The third, I think, is very important that every company during these moments reflects on the purpose. How can we create value to the society at large, to the stakeholders? And as a tobacco company, there is one area where we can have the biggest positive impact on the society, and this is addressing the harm of our products. That's why we have accelerated our transformation from a tobacco company to a science and technology-powered company, because today, science-backed, innovative products that do not involve combustion offer a much better alternative to more than 1 billion adult smokers around the world. And we see that there is a strong momentum. We have already launched them in 61 countries. We have already 16.4 million adult users of smoke-free products, with 72% of them already adopting. So we see great potential, and we are committed to partner with Egyptian partners and authorities to make it happen.
That's great. So we've got the results of the first poll in, and it's a very technophilic response. We have 88.6% of the audience think that it's very important to use innovative technology to set themselves up for the post-crisis recovery. 11.5% think it's fairly important, and nobody thinks it's not important, not at all important, and nobody doesn't have an opinion. So that's great to hear. I'd like to dive a little bit further into the specific economic issues that businesses have to face in Egypt. The crisis has come. The COVID-19 crisis has come at a time of considerable economic turbulence and reform in Egypt. Even before the crisis happened, we saw the government was trying to take painful and difficult reforms that had been put off for a long time to try to rebalance the economy, the cutting of subsidies, the imposing of a value-added tax, the devaluing of the currency, and the getting the house in order sufficiently to get quite a big loan from the International Monetary Fund in 2016. Now, the crisis has, the pandemic has disrupted all that, as it has in many countries. What are the reasons you're seeing? What are the clues you can give us as business people as to how robustly the country is prepared to recover when the crisis dissipates? So maybe if we could go to Ashraf, Bakry. I mean, you're seeing consumer spending at the sort of most basic level. What's your prognosis?
Allow me first to give a bit of a background, Robert. I am the MD of Unilever. I'm also the head of Industry and Trade Committee in the MCHAM and a non-executive board member in Bongjuker. So I see the world from very different angles. Yes. And in my opinion, 5 years ago, which is not very long in any nation's history, we used to receive visits from US missions coming to look at the economy in Egypt as part of the MCHAM. And their main three worries were security, political stability, and availability of Forex. That was exactly 5 years ago, 2015. So if I really look at the reforms, we have a very short memory as people, and we always like to look at the potential, the future, what's opportunities are available, etc., etc. But if I look at what has actually happened the last 5 years, it's by every means remarkable. Now, am I 100% satisfied? The answer is definitely not. And as usual, we'll never be 100% satisfied. So overall, when it comes to economic reforms, I think the government has finally taken very bold decisions that were required probably 70, 80 years ago to push this economy further. Now, it's not easy. The heritage is really complicated, but most of the very difficult decisions have been made. Now, the impact of that on today is the following. Let me talk about Unilever because this is the area of my responsibility. Currently, we are discussing very potential global sourcing projects out of Egypt. Egypt, when it comes to cost after the devaluation, we have become the cost benchmark for 8 out of the 10 categories we produce. So usually people tend to think of China and India as the most cost-efficient nations when it comes to production. Egypt is actually now beating that on 8 out of the 10 categories. So the potential is big. The free trade agreements Egypt has is unbelievable. So we have access to 2.6 billion people duty-free in the world through free trade agreements. Why isn't the opportunity then materializing sooner? It's 2 things. Number one, the investors globally needed to know how serious the government is about reforms, and I think the message was delivered. Number 2, the red tape is still there and it needs to be addressed properly. Now, there are lots of attempts, but that's one of the things that I think the government needs to continue to focus on whether in the past or in the future. And if that's addressed,
in your specific business, the red tape, can you give us an example of the difficulty you face? What's a particular?
Yeah, of course. So,
we can get rid of?
Of course. So if I want to dive into specifics, I would call one or two things. Number one is consistency of specifically financial laws. So we see lots of changes in tax laws, in VAT, etc., etc. And I think for any investor to come into the country, especially what I would call greenfield investors, they need to understand what is happening long term. So I cannot make one feasibility study and then discover tomorrow that things are changing. So that's one big thing. The second would be the whole synchronization of all the entities that are associated, for example, with the clearance, customs. So we're working as MCHAM now with the government, and that's another direction that has been happening, I would say, very frequently recently, okay, where we join forces as private sector and as government to address a certain issue. That was not a very common approach in previously, okay? And we benchmark the clearance time of Egypt versus others, and then we draw a plan to come back to the, I would say, closer to the global benchmark. So there are lots of things I can talk about, but I think these are the two big things happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
However, the opportunity is really big.
Okay. How did you agree with that assessment of the state of the economy and of economic reform, or what would you emphasize?
In fact, I fully agree with Ashraf, and also like Ashraf, I co-chair the Digital Transformation Committee at the AmCham, American Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a board member, recently appointed board member of the German Chamber. I would say that because of my work, I have access to different industries, so I can really benchmark and compare what's happening in different industries, whether it's consumer-related, energy sectors, public sector services, and so on. And I can't agree more with the points that Ashraf has indicated. One area also that I would like to highlight in terms of investments, when an investor considers a country, they need to understand how easy it is to establish business within the country and how easy also it is for them to exit if they would like to decide to stop the business. And I've seen during the past 2.5 years, or 3 years rather, some changes even in the policies and the law to allow and protect or support the way a business is led. One of which was the data privacy law that has been just passed via the parliament. And although I would say that maybe there's some issues that would need to need discussion, and we are currently looking at that to communicate our point of view, if at all possible, to impact or have some enhancements in the law. Still, focusing in the right direction, making sure that the laws and the environment in Egypt would support foreign direct investment is a very big thing. And there is a big focus, starting from the president, from the different ministers, on supporting and encouraging foreign direct investments to come to Egypt. From SAP perspective, we are also considering establishing hubs or center of excellences in Egypt because of several reasons, one of which is, of course, cost, as highlighted by Ashraf. But the second thing is also related to talent and availability of the talent pool. And when we look at talent, we're looking at the technical side of the talent, and we're looking also at the languages. So in Egypt, you would find multilingual talents that are available in the market, young, motivated, who can basically support such ways of establishing a hubs. And also, Egypt has a massive startup community. And this startup community has been fed by different ministries and supported also by the Central Bank of Egypt, where they're trying to build some accelerators and support financial inclusion, support the fintechs via their different initiatives. So I see from my point of view, I'm positive on the future and for Egypt. And I believe that Egypt is moving in the right direction. We just need to have the same steady pace that we have witnessed over the last few years. Okay, well, let's get the view from Mostafa here, because you perhaps have a view of what it's like trying to start something in Egypt. What do you think of the principal policy of regulatory obstacles that could have been a bit easier?
Yeah, so actually given that we started out of Egypt and we've launched in multiple countries across Africa and South Asia and Asia, we have seen that relatively actually Egypt, comparing across in terms of ease of doing business, has been quite the easiest, right? And like a few years ago, I would recall if, let's say, guys like us who are starting something from scratch, who would like to meet, let's say, the Minister of Investment or the Minister of Trade, it would have been close to impossible, right? The fact that now, like, we start something from scratch and you start and you grow it and you're able to, and they actually be the ones reaching out to you, trying to find ways to support you, protect you, and establish with very powerful local agencies like the Egyptian Competition Authority, for example, which has been strengthened over the past quite a lot. And being able to kind of put as a local kind of company, protect you and put your interests above all, and help you kind of pave the way to not only provide your services in the country locally, but also export it, has been quite a change, in all honesty, from a kind of organization, easy to do business and accessibility kind of perspective. What we've seen is that the country itself, given the nature of it, as Hoda has mentioned, that the majority of the population is quite young, the speed of adoption of whatever is new is very, very fast, right? And coupled with very strong talent on the technical side, that's very globalized, that's multilingual, that's quite global, basically. And we have seen that it's very easy to establish very strong engineering centers that can build that can build products in Egypt for the world, basically, world-class products. We still see challenges in terms of brain drain in general. We see companies in the US, companies in Europe, in Germany in specific, being able to capture a lot of the Egyptian talent. But we're very positive that with kind of companies emerging, with companies becoming more professionals in the startup kind of side, with companies starting delivering and solving for global problems, and starting not only innovating on a local or regional landscape, but also on the global theater, I think it looks very, very positive. The fact that the Egyptian pound was devalued, the economic reforms that has happened over the past, all of that strong agencies when it comes to competition protection authorities, when it comes to consumer protection, all of these organizations being strengthened with the investments in infrastructure, I think it's only better from there. It's only upwards from there.
Okay. So I've got another question for the audience here, which is just how optimistic do you feel about the outlook for Egypt's economy? And again, there's 5 options: very optimistic, no strong opinion, not optimistic, and not at all optimistic. If you can vote on that while we go to Vassilis. Vassilis, I'd like your take on basically that question, the outlook for the Egyptian economy, bearing in mind both the crisis and the reforms.
We are very optimistic. Yes, we are very optimistic about the outlook of the Egyptian economy. I think we have seen tremendous reforms in the last years, touching every aspect. And Egypt has great strengths. It has a great geostrategic location. It has a large, growing, vibrant, and more tech-savvy population, and can tap into the reforms. Last week, because we co-participate also with Ashraf, with Hoda in the American Chamber of Commerce, we had the Minister of Electricity and Transformation of Energy, and he told us about the journey of transformation in the energy sector. Not only Egypt has made fast-track expansion of the electricity, but also is going very fast to the transformation of the renewables, committing 42% by 2035, and we have seen some of the greatest projects of the world, the biggest solar park. Energy is just an example, but we see it across different sectors. We see it in transportation, we see it in technology. And what I see as the future is the diversification of the Egyptian economy towards knowledge-based, leveraging science and technology, further upskilling its people, creating inclusive growth, but also private sector working together with the government on the reforms, having comprehensive science-based regulation. And I believe science can solve some of the toughest problems of society. And we have seen excellent examples from climate protection to COVID to other problems. And as a tobacco company, reducing harm is an accepted form in many other industries, from reducing the salt and sugar contents in food and drinks to lowering emissions by switching to electric cars or more efficient ways of transportation. And tobacco just falls into this category. That's why we trust Egypt as a major hub for our business. We see the shift into science, and we are working together with our partners and the authorities to introduce the smoke-free products. And this is one of the ways to contribute the most as a tobacco company, to replace cigarettes with better alternatives, because now science allows us, and as a company, we have decided to fully disrupt our operating model, and actually we are changing our purpose. We are changing our operations to make this happen. And in reality, we're becoming not just a B2B company. We used to have a product basically transactional at the point of sale. Now we're becoming a B2C company to explain the problem to the consumers, show the solutions, and also avoid any unintended consequences, because we shouldn't forget, we only target adults and smokers, and we should never have youth access to our product. So we are very optimistic about the Egyptian economy and the society. and we are partnering to make it happen.
Excellent. Well, we got the results of our poll in from the audience now, and 21% of them were very optimistic. The largest group, a small majority, 52%, were optimistic. About 20% had no strong opinion. I guess these are very turbulent and unpredictable times, and who knows whether that vaccine's actually going to work or not, although I for one, tend to be optimistic about these things. And then just 5% were not optimistic, and no one was in the bottom category, not optimistic at all. So that's a fairly positive set of results. I am going to throw in a question from the audience here. So Omar Sahan has asked, he says, working from home within virtual offices was one of the big shifts that we've seen in the workplace during the crisis. And given the huge positive potential of this for businesses, do you think that we're prepared to deal with the adverse social impact? Not everyone thinks that there's an adverse social impact from working from home, but some do. Personally, I'm desperate to get back to the office, but what do people think? Maybe if we could ask Hoda at SAP, how do you think you balance the positives and negatives of the shift from home working?
Yeah, so I agree with Omar basically in his question. Working from home, although it provides some economic benefits for companies, it provides safety as well for the individuals or for the employees, but it comes sometimes with difficulties in terms of communication, difficulties in terms of mental health as well, and difficulties in terms of physical fitness, because when we were in the lockdown state in the beginning and not meeting people, it helped us maybe, or gave us an opportunity to eat more, not looking after our looks, not being prepared or fresh to meet people every day with the energy that we take. And to that end, actually, SAP has rolled out several sessions and several initiatives to support its employees, whether from a financial planning perspective, putting in mind that we've done something very similar to the colleagues here, that we did not lay anyone off because of COVID. We did not reduce salaries. In fact, we gave the team reduction in the targets. And I believe we are one of the few companies worldwide who have reduced the targets for its employees. But at the same time, we were very cognizant about the mental health. It's not easy to work from home. It's not easy just to be confined in your room, specifically as well when I'm looking outside of Egypt. Like, for instance, in countries like the United Arab Emirates, where we find people living in small apartments, living on their own, because they are not, they don't have their families or their young population and so on. So the impact of working on your own just through the virtual world with whatever technologies, communication technologies, has to be addressed. And to that end, I think there is a duty as well on the companies to consider mental health, to consider talking more to the audience. What we've done as practical steps, in addition to the mental health sessions and the financial planning sessions that we have been doing, we've also rolled out several surveys or touch points where we get the experience, we listen to the experience, we activated or re-emphasized the helplines that are provided by the company, giving the employees an opportunity to speak with full confidence to the helplines in case they face social violence, for instance, which we have seen in some instances and some societies have evolved. Right? If they suffer from that, they can speak in confidence, they can get advice, they can talk about any issues that are facing them, and also we provide forums for people to talk with each other. So, for instance, since the start of the lockdown, I've been running virtual breakfasts on a weekly basis with my team as a checkpoint. We share our experiences, and now I'm asking also the team members to come up with a topic that we discussed during those virtual breakfasts. It's a 30 minutes, but it's really a refresher that has been run diligently since the start of COVID to date. And it gives different perspectives. Someone is talking about sports, other one is talking about communities, helping, volunteering. I think there is a big need to have those communities or virtual communities as well involved. I hope this answers the question. question.
Excellent. It does. I would remind members of the audience that there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. It just says Q&A. So if you want to throw in some questions to our distinguished panel, please do. We have another question that's related to that. It's another pandemic thing from Yeva Just, who says, what are the best practices and examples of how you can build relations with new clients or partners overseas, given how difficult it is to travel and meet people during the pandemic? Perhaps we could ask Ashraf about that.
Okay, thank you. To be honest, I'm not currently actively managing overseas customers. Okay, but I can tell you one thing: the world is not going to go back to what it used to be. Okay, we've learned a new skill, which is managing virtually. Companies are going to go and have a blended model or a hybrid model for what we used to have and what we currently have. Okay, so people are going to get used to managing virtually. Virtual meetings are going to become part of the role. Previously, it was an exception. Probably later on, face-to-face meetings for overseas is going to be the exception. People are going to question why should they travel. So it's not going to be the same anymore. Now, the good news is it's on both sides. So it's going to be 100% acceptable at the other side that we're going to meet virtually. And therefore, it's going to be easier for people to communicate now, because previously I had to go in person and schedule a trip and fly to meet someone. Okay. Now it's going to be far more acceptable for people to connect online. And the technology, the innovation that we're going to see in the sphere of virtual meeting, in my opinion, is going to completely blow our minds. So I read a lot about it, and while we're enjoying platforms like Cisco, like Microsoft Teams, like Zoom today, there are lots of innovations happening. Hoda is laughing, so maybe she's definitely more acquainted. Okay, 3D holograms, etc., that are going to come on stream and would make communication much more easy.
Do you think? I mean, maybe I can bring in Vassilis here. Do you think it works as well? Do you think that there are things that we're missing by not traveling?
Yeah, for me, I think the new normal has definitely created some amazing opportunities. Speaking about what we have done in our organization, we have started communicating much more frequently, and I believe that COVID made all of us feel vulnerable. And we understood how much we need each other, and I think companies put the human face at the front. And we have done pulse surveys regularly with our employees, and we have actually seen that the engagement rate is increasing substantially, because you lack some physical face-to-face contact, but you can overcompensate it via virtual ways of communicating. And similar to what Hoda was mentioning about her company, what we have done is also parenting workshops. We have helped people on the nutrition, on the virtual fitness. We do mental healthness. So all of these things were not happening before. We have been also being the #1, I think, company in the world to be certified with equal salary certification. This was something that came on top, and it helps people feel that we are inclusive, we are doing it all together, we communicate all together, we have a clear vision, but not only inside the company. I mentioned before about the way we interact with the partners. 1 year ago, we decided to set an experiment in Cairo to have 100 retailers, and we talk about mom and pop shops in Egypt. An experiment to connect digitally 100% with them, using an app to order products. We thought this is impossible. Today, we have more than 18,000 retailers, which is around 50% of the business. And we talk about one of the largest markets in the region, Egypt, digitally connected. And we do the whole journey from onboarding the retailer online. And now through an app, we have solved some of the retailer biggest problems like working capital, real-time communication, and so you can build the relationship also through online. So we see opportunity. Of course, we have to change, and change is not easy, but we try to see always the opportunity. And I believe in Egypt, the whole society is really keen on change. And I'm definitely very optimistic that the new technology will help us a lot.
Okay, we got a final quick poll question for the audience, which is, in your opinion, how important are sustainability and inclusivity to the recovery? Two quite different things there, but answer it how you like. Again, five levels of response: very important, fairly important, no strong opinion, not important, or not important at all. And that's how important are sustainability and inclusivity to the recovery. Now, I mean, of course, the fact that people are traveling less means that, you know, some environmental benefits will have been realized. But I guess, I mean, a question about the travel thing is, do you think it's going to come back when there's a vaccine? Maybe I could ask Mostafa about this, since you're in effect in the travel business. Do you think when people are going to go back to something similar to the same degree of moving around, or are we going to be in a more sort of virtual new normal?
Yes, so I slightly have a different opinion from everyone, and I think for us, even when the pandemic started, when we started, all of us working from home, we've seen that it was quite efficient, was very, very fast. A lot of things have improved. A lot of focus was brought in, right? But we missed one key element, which is the great ideas that come out of everyday social interaction. The fact that I have my team next to me and I can just go and whenever I have an idea and go and speak to them and brainstorm, and each one takes the idea of the other to the next level. And maybe because we're less kind of mature business, we're still very, very early on, and there are a lot of problem solving that we need to do every day, every hour, every second. And that means that there's a lot of social interaction that needs to be in place. And we've seen that this innovation was not 100% there when everyone was working in a place. We're not kind of together, thinking together across the board. I think we're social creatures by nature. I think we're all enjoy the social interactions. At least for me, back in May, when there's still things were out of control, I couldn't just stay at home, and I felt that even it was impacting me personally and my quality of work and my productivity. And I started going to office from that time onwards. And I've seen that without even telling our team to come back, they all one by one started to come back to the office. And since June, we were all back at office just because we couldn't take it to work from home anymore.
So possibly because the boss was at the office.
Sorry?
Were they coming back partly perhaps because the boss was at the office?
Maybe, I don't know, but I never told anyone at least to come back. So, but maybe. But yeah, but I think since that we've seen that this innovation, I think it was just a point proven for me at least, that this innovation comes from being there, from the social interaction that happens on a daily basis.
Excellent. I don't think we have about slightly less than 5 minutes left. So I'll start by giving you the results of that poll on the question of how important sustainability and inclusivity are to the recovery. Very strongly in favor there. We have 71% saying very important, 18% saying fairly important, about 8% saying no strong opinion, and 2.5% saying not important, and no one saying not important at all. We got an awful lot of late questions coming in here now. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but I think I'm going to go with this one from Amira Hashem, and I'm going to put it very quickly to each of the panelists, which is, what are your key takeaways for working through the crisis? And what are you not going to go back to doing that you did before the crisis, even if you could? So let's go very quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ashraf.
Okay. First of all, I think The key takeout is no matter what happens, there is always a way. Okay, because some people do, just stop and think that the world is going to collapse. Human race has been able to evolve through whatever crisis. It's just a matter of time to adapt. Okay, so that's the key takeout. What am I not going to do if once the pandemic is over? I think the balance between so work-life balance, what we call work-life balance. Okay, I think the pandemic has given everyone a real opportunity to reflect. Okay, being locked, and I agree with Mostafa, by the way. There is nothing like the human interaction. I'm not saying it will disappear. Actually, I personally prefer face-to-face. It's much more dynamic. It's emotional. It's everything. Okay, but then the balance between both is going to be different.
Excellent, Hoda, very quickly.
For me, the most important thing is resilience and clarity in mind. You have to have personal resilience. I know sometimes there are waves, up and downs, even personally for me, but having the clarity as to where you want to go and how do you want to see yourself after the crisis. That's the key takeaway for me. And what I'm not going to do is unnecessary expenditure. And this is across the board, whether on personal level, because there was a lot of reflections for me personally on my own personal expenditure and on work expenditure. We need to cut the fat. We need to be lean and we need to be focused on delivering with limited.
Mostafa, what's your key? You're not going to go back to doing again.
I'm totally aligned with Hoda. Exactly, actually, these points that I wanted to mention. I think the resilience I think what we learned, all of us, is from a business perspective, how can we be a lot more resilient? How can we deal very quickly with problems, and how can we turn problems into actually opportunities and make use of them quite quickly? And I think this was a well-needed training for all of us. I think to go from defense to offense, to make sure that we don't spend so much time. We try as quickly as possible to solve for the situation, but at the same time think about what every situation brings in terms of opportunity. Because for us, COVID was, while it was very hard to deal with, but also presented great opportunities across the board. So how do you use every opportunity and every challenge like this and turn it into opportunity? What we learned from is how to be a lot more frugal, right? A lot of things you look at and you think, yes, these are important expenditures to do, but in reality, what happens? When in reality, they're not really actually very, very important, right? So how can you have a lot more scrutiny across the board when it comes to frugality, and how do you make sure that this is more of a culture than that everyone treats money that like his own money, basically, right? And expenditure in general is something that is very well thought, right? So yeah.
Okay, Vassilis, the last panel intervention from you. Key takeaway, and what are you not going to go back to doing?
Takeaway is that we are adapting to the whole situation when we work together and we have a clear purpose. What I wouldn't do is to focus on non-essentials. I believe as individuals, thinking about ourselves in our families, with our friends, and our business leaders, focus on what really matters and take all the rest out. Think how you can maximize your impact for a better tomorrow.
Those are very, very sound words. I think that's all we've got time for. I would simply sum up, I think the mood of the, it's not a room, what is it? The mood of the conference is that although this year has thrown extraordinary challenges at us, both in the worlds of business, in Egypt, in the whole world, that human beings are incredibly adaptable. And when even one of us has a good idea, such as a vaccine, it can, with luck, spread around the whole world very quickly. So I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. I'd like to thank the panelists, Ashraf, Hoda, Vassilis, and Mostafa. I'd like to thank our sponsors, PMI International. And I'd like to thank you all, the audience, for joining us and for your contributions. So that's all from me, Robert Guest at The Economist. And thank you all very much for your time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
you.